Daddy, I'll be good. Please come back.
I'm not leaving you here. Not tonight.
He stood there, frozen under the flickering lights of the bus terminal, watching a 3-year-old boy clutch a worn-out teddy bear. The child's legs trembled, but it wasn't from the cold. It was from something deeper: fear. Abandonment. The kind that scars for life. Micah didn't cry. He just whispered, "Daddy, I'll be good. Please come back." But the man who brought him there, his own father, was already disappearing into the darkness. Hours passed. People walked by. No one stopped. Until one man did. Elliot Grant felt something crack inside his chest the moment he saw Micah alone on that bench. The same ache he once felt when he lost his own son. When he asked, "Where's your father, buddy?" Micah only shook his head and held out the teddy bear like a peace offering. Elliot knelt, voice shaking. "I'm not leaving you here. Not tonight." And that's where his story truly began. Before we dive deeper, please, if you're listening to this right now, I want to prove my mom wrong. She said I can't even reach 1,000 subscribers. Help me show her that stories like this matter. Subscribe to King's Folklore, and let's keep breathing life into tales that refuse to die. Now let's continue. The cold wind pushed through the open-air bus terminal like it was searching for the weakest soul to torment. And that night, the weakest soul was a 3-year-old boy named Micah, small, fragile, and bundled in a coat that was 2 sizes too big. The sleeve swallowed his tiny hands, but he didn't complain. He simply held on to his teddy bear like it was the last familiar thing in a world that no longer made sense. His father, Derek Miles, had carried him there quietly. No stroller, no bag, no plan. Just trembling hands and tear-stained cheeks. For a moment, Derek sat beside him on the hard metal bench, staring at the ground as if the concrete itself was judging him. His voice cracked when he whispered, "I'm sorry, Micah. I can't do this anymore." Micah didn't understand those words. He only understood the slight pressure when Derek's hand brushed his cheek one last time. Gentle. Lingering. Almost apologetic. Then Derek stood, stepped back, and walked toward the exit without looking over his shoulder. "Daddy?" Micah called softly. No answer. "Daddy, I'll be good. I promise." Still nothing. Derek's figure shrank into the distance until the shadows swallowed him whole. Micah didn't cry. Maybe because he'd seen his father cry too many times to know that tears didn't fix anything. He just clutched his teddy bear tighter and waited. Because children always wait. They wait long after the world has already moved on. Hours passed. People came and went. Some glanced. Some ignored him completely. One woman smiled sadly but kept walking, maybe assuming someone would come back for him. Bus engines roared. Announcements echoed overhead. The lights buzzed, flickered, and fought the darkness with all the strength they had left. And then, he walked in. Elliot Grant. The kind of man who looked like he didn't belong in a place like this, tall, well-dressed, and carrying the quiet presence of someone who used to be powerful, used to be whole. But grief had carved something out of him. The aching kind. The kind that makes your shoulders slump even when you try to stand tall. He had come to the bus terminal for the strangest reason. He couldn't sleep. And when he couldn't sleep, he walked. He walked until his legs felt like they remembered life again. Tonight, they led him straight to Micah. At first, Elliot didn't even realize the boy was alone. He just saw a small figure on the bench, staring ahead like he was waiting for a world that forgot him. Then he noticed. No adult nearby. No luggage. Just a child, shivering. His heart clenched. Too familiar. Too close to memories he wasn't ready to face. Still, he approached slowly, didn't want to scare him. "Hey, buddy," he said softly, crouching down. "Where's your dad? Or your mom?" Micah blinked at him, confused by the question. Then he held out his teddy bear like a peace offering, like a child saying, "I don't know who you are, but maybe you're safe." Elliot swallowed hard. "You alone here?" he asked. Silence. Then a tiny nod. The kind of nod that should never come from a 3-year-old. Elliot sat down beside him, keeping a respectful distance. "It's cold tonight," he murmured. "You hungry?" Micah shook his head, even though his stomach growled loudly enough to betray him. Elliot pretended not to hear the growl. It was dignity he was protecting, even for a child this small. A few minutes passed. No parent came. No frantic footsteps. Nothing. Something inside Elliot snapped, or awakened. Maybe both. He pulled off his scarf and gently wrapped it around Micah's neck. The boy leaned into the warmth without thinking. Kids always know when kindness is real. "You don't have to talk," Elliot whispered. "But I'm not leaving you here." The terminal lights flickered again like they were agreeing with him. Micah looked up, eyes wide and glossy. "Daddy said he'll come back." Elliot's chest tightened. That sentence, so pure, so heartbreaking, stabbed straight through the armor he'd built after losing his own son 2 years ago. "What if," Elliot said softly, "we wait together?" Micah blinked, then nodded. So they sat there, side by side, hours passing like slow-moving clouds. At one point, Micah leaned against Elliot's arm and fell asleep. Elliot froze, not wanting to wake him, not wanting to break that tiny moment of trust. What would you do, Elliot thought silently, if this happened to your child? But it had happened. Not exactly like this, but close enough. A security guard passed by and raised a brow. "That your kid?" Elliot looked at Micah sleeping. He wished the answer were yes. "No," he said, "but I'm staying with him until someone comes." The guard stared a little too long, as if wondering if he should intervene. But something about Elliot's face, maybe the grief etched into it, made him walk away without further questions. Midnight faded into 2 a.m. The buses slowed. The cold deepened. Still no father. Elliot knew then. This wasn't accidental. This was abandonment. But he didn't say it out loud. He just held Micah a little closer, whispering, "I've got you, little man. I promise." Because sometimes, a promise from a stranger can sound more honest than one from blood. And as the night finally began to lift, Elliot realized that finding this boy wasn't random at all. It was a calling. A second chance. Maybe the divine kind. Maybe just the human kind. Either way, his life was no longer his alone. Morning light crept into the terminal like a shy visitor, brushing its way across cold tiles and empty benches. Micah was still asleep when Elliot felt a gentle ache in his back from sitting all night. But he didn't move. The boy's small hand was curled around his coat sleeve, as if letting go would make him disappear too. When Micah finally stirred, his lashes fluttered like tiny wings. He blinked up at Elliot, confused, cautious, then whispered, "You stayed?" Elliot managed a smile. "I did. I told you I wasn't going anywhere." That simple answer made Micah sit up just a little straighter, like trust was a fragile tower he was still trying to build. But the moment didn't last long. 2 bus station officers approached them, not unkindly, but with the stiff professionalism of people trained to follow policy. "Sir," one officer said, "we received a report about an unattended child. We need to take him until social services can get here." Micah instantly grabbed Elliot's hand, eyes wide with panic. "Don't leave me." Elliot felt the instinct rise before he could think. Protective. Fierce. Almost fatherly. He exhaled slowly. "I'm not leaving you. I just need to talk to them, okay?" Micah nodded but clung tighter. The officers asked their questions: how Elliot found him, what time, whether he'd seen the father. They checked cameras, documented everything, and as protocol demanded, prepared to transfer Micah to the state's emergency foster intake. Elliot's jaw tightened. He'd read enough news stories to know how overwhelmed that system was. How kids like Micah, kids with disabilities, were often left for hours, shuffled between caseworkers, or placed in temporary homes where they were just another file number. The thought of this 3-year-old boy being tossed into that maze made something in Elliot ignite. "Is there any way I can stay with him?" Elliot asked. The officer hesitated. "Sir, that's not usual procedure." "But is it allowed?" Silence stretched. Finally, with a sympathetic sigh, the officer said, "Given the circumstances, you can come with him to the children's hospital for evaluation. After that, it's up to the caseworker." Micah whispered, "You'll come?" Elliot didn't even pause. Every step. The hospital was bright, sterile, too cold for a place meant to heal. Micah sat on the exam bed, swinging his weak legs slightly, gripping his teddy bear with both hands. Elliot stayed beside him, answering questions, filling out forms he had no legal right to fill, but the caseworker accepted his help anyway because Micah kept looking at him like he was the only safe thing in the room. During the tests, doctors noticed something unusual, not wrong, but extraordinary. When the pediatric neurologist casually handed Micah a shape-sorting puzzle, he completed it in seconds. Not minutes. Seconds. The doctor raised an eyebrow. Well, that's interesting. Then they tried number blocks. Micah arranged them in sequences. No one asked him to create patterns. Only someone studying advanced algorithms would recognize. Is he taught any of this? The doctor asked. Elliot shook his head. I don't think so. The doctor leaned forward. Fascinated. This child has a form of mathematical savant syndrome. His disability affects motor strength, but his cognitive pattern recognition is extremely advanced, possibly genius level. Micah just giggled as he stacked blocks into a swirling pattern that looked like art. Elliot's throat tightened. The world had abandoned a miracle. But miracles weren't always quiet. They demanded to be seen. The caseworker, Miss Darlene Hunt, entered with thick folders and tired eyes. Mr. Grant, she began carefully, I understand you stayed with him overnight. That was kind. Kind? Elliot repeated. That's a child who was abandoned. Someone had to stay. She nodded, softening. It doesn't happen often. Strangers stepping in. Elliot didn't respond. He kept his hand on Micah's back as the boy leaned into him. Miss Hunt sighed. We need to place him in emergency foster care. But he seems to respond to you. And given his condition and what the doctor found, he'll need stability, not another disruption. Elliot felt a pull he couldn't explain, something spiritual. Something that felt like destiny knocking on a door he didn't know he had. What are you saying? He asked. Darlene met his eyes. If you're willing, you can apply to be his temporary guardian. Just until we find his father, or arrange long-term placement. Micah turned, eyes shining. Can he? Please? Elliot swallowed. I want to help him. I really do. But the truth hit him like cold water. He hadn't healed from losing his son. He still woke at 3 a.m., hearing footsteps that weren't there. Could he handle being responsible for another child again? Could he survive losing one twice? Yet when Micah looked at him, fragile, brilliant, hopeful, Elliot knew something quietly, deeply true. This wasn't replacing his son. This was answering a calling. He crouched, so he was eye level with Micah. If they allow it, I'll be here for you. Okay? Micah nodded so hard he almost toppled off the bed. Darlene smiled softly. Then I'll start the paperwork. Hours later, as the sun dipped behind the city skyline, Elliot carried Micah to his car. The boy's legs were tired, but his face glowed with a shy happiness he hadn't shown all day. Your car smells nice, Micah said, sniffing dramatically. Elliot laughed, the first real laugh in months. That's because it's clean. Kids usually fix that. Micah gasped. I can fix it too. Elliot chuckled. I believe you. Halfway home, Micah whispered, Do you think Daddy will come back? Elliot's hands tightened on the steering wheel. I don't know, he answered honestly. But you're safe now. And you're not alone. Micah leaned his head against the seat, whispering, Okay. And as the city lights reflected in the car window, Elliot realized something unshakable. He wasn't rescuing Micah. Micah was rescuing him too. The first week in Elliot's home felt like stepping into a new universe for Micah. The house was warm, filled with soft carpets, gentle lighting, and quiet halls that echoed safety instead of fear. Every morning, Micah woke up expecting the cold bench, expecting strangers walking past him. But instead, he'd find Elliot in the kitchen, making pancakes shaped like numbers. Today, we're doing 8s, Elliot would say. Micah laughed every time because his 8s always looked like snowmen. Evenings were gentle too. Cartoons, warm baths, a bedtime story. And always, always, Elliot checking in. You okay, little man? Micah would nod, hugging his teddy bear. If someone walked by the window too quickly, or if the wind slammed a door, Micah would flinch, eyes wide. But every time that happened, Elliot was right there. You're safe here, he whispered. I've got you. But healing is never a straight road. It's messy. It loops. It surprises you. And one surprise arrived 10 days later. The doorbell rang. It was mid-afternoon, and Micah was in the living room drawing complicated spiral patterns that looked like galaxies. Elliot wiped his hands on a kitchen towel and opened the door. Standing there was a police officer, and behind him, a man who looked like he hadn't slept in weeks. Derek. His clothes were wrinkled, his eyes were bloodshot. His entire frame shook not from cold, but from guilt that had eaten him alive. Mr. Grant, the officer said, this is Derek Miles, Micah's biological father. He came to the station today. Came meaning he wasn't found, meaning he walked in on his own. For the first time since that night, Derek lifted his eyes to meet Elliot's. The pain there was indescribable. Is he okay? Derek whispered. Elliot didn't answer immediately. He studied the man. The trembling hands. The uneven breathing. The weight of regret that bent his shoulders like a punishment. He's safe, Elliot finally said. He's inside. Derek closed his eyes in relief and anguish. I want to see him, he said, voice breaking. The officer nodded. Legally, he has the right. Elliot stepped aside slowly, heart pounding in his chest. He wasn't afraid Derek would take Micah, he was afraid of what seeing Derek would do to the boy. When Derek walked into the living room, Micah didn't recognize him at first, the unshaven beard, the exhausted face, the slumped posture. But the moment Derek whispered, Micah, the boy froze. He turned his head slowly. His teddy bear slid from his hands and dropped onto the carpet. Daddy? The room held its breath. Derek collapsed to his knees, arms open but too ashamed to reach further. I'm so sorry, he choked. I shouldn't have left. I'm sorry, baby. I'm so sorry. Micah stared for a long, shaky moment, then took 2 tiny steps forward, then stopped again. Elliot's voice was gentle. You're okay, Micah. You get to choose. Micah looked at Derek, then at Elliot, then at the teddy bear on the floor, the one he kept waiting with him at the bus terminal. Finally, he asked the question children ask when the world breaks them. Why did you go? Derek's face crumpled. Pure agony. Because I was scared. I lost your mom. And then you were sick. And I thought you deserved someone stronger than me. I was wrong. I was stupid. But I never stopped loving you. Micah's lips trembled. You said you would come back. Derek nodded, tears streaming down his cheeks. I know. I'm sorry I didn't. I'm sorry you waited. Silence wrapped around them, heavy but honest. Then Micah whispered, I'm not mad. I just missed you. Derek broke. Completely. He lowered his forehead to the carpet and sobbed like a man who had finally met his consequences. Micah walked forward and placed his tiny hand on his father's head. Derek covered it with both hands carefully, reverently. Elliot turned away for a moment, giving them space. He wasn't jealous. He wasn't threatened. What he felt was deeper, like witnessing a wound finally admit it needed healing. After a long while, Derek stood up, trying to wipe his face. I'm willing to do anything, he said to Elliot, voice raw. Counseling, parenting classes, rehab, whatever they want. I won't run again. I want to be his father. Micah looked up quickly. But can I stay here too? The question pierced both men. Elliot knelt beside him. You can have both, Micah. Derek nodded immediately. Yes, you can. The officer stepped forward. Given the circumstances, Child Services will likely recommend shared guardianship while Derek gets evaluated. Derek looked down at Micah. Can I still visit you? Micah nodded shyly. But you can't leave this time. Derek cupped the boy's face. Never again. Over the next hours, papers were signed. Plans were made. Darlene Hunt, the caseworker, arrived to oversee the arrangements. When Derek stepped outside for a moment to speak with her, Micah tugged Elliot's sleeve. "Are you leaving now?" he asked, voice tiny. Elliot scooped him up gently. "No, little man. I'm still here. I told you I'm not going anywhere." Micah rested his head on Elliot's shoulder, comforted. Then he whispered something that melted both fear and doubt. "You can be my Elliot, and he can be my daddy." The simplicity of that sentence brought Elliot to tears he didn't expect. Kids didn't need labels. Kids needed love. And Micah had room for both. Later, when Derek returned and saw Micah in Elliot's arms, he didn't look threatened, he looked grateful. "Thank you," Derek said softly, "for keeping him alive and loved." Elliot shook his head. "He saved me too." The two men shared a look. Not competition, not resentment. Just understanding two broken people choosing to heal for one small boy. And as the sun set behind them, washing the sky in warm golds and reds, Micah stood between them holding both their hands, like a bridge being rebuilt, piece by fragile piece. Because family isn't always blood. Sometimes, family is whoever stays when the night is cold and the bench is empty. In the weeks that followed, Micah's world became something beautiful. Two men, once lost in their own darkness, now choosing light for the sake of a little boy who refused to stop believing in love. Derek rebuilt his life one counseling session at a time. Elliot found healing in every laugh Micah shared. And Micah, he learned that even broken families can be made whole again when hearts stay open. Sometimes God sends help in the form of strangers. Sometimes healing walks in wearing a suit. And sometimes forgiveness is the miracle that saves everyone. If this story touched you, hit that subscribe button for more emotional tales from King's folklore. And even if it didn't, come on, subscribe anyway, we'll win you over next time. Drop a comment, like the video, and let's keep the stories alive. Thanks for watching.